Check, check, test, test. Yes, people. So, someone asked a while ago for a breakdown on front to back. So very delayed, but we're here. Um, so what I don't want to do is like a standard track breakdown and say this is the drums, all the individual elements. I want to talk about why I've done certain things, and someone asked specifically about how I process the vocals. So I think that is going to be the perfect place to start. Let me double check we are recording. We are indeed. Right. So, obviously, Front to Back is produced by me, vocaled by Malazzo. It was the lead track on my Front to Back EP in July 2021. Um, one of my favorite productions of all time. The instrumental itself is so Albsy, and I've really felt like I nailed that Albsy sound in this. Malazzo just battered the vocals as always. So, the vocals on their own.
Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body like that. You know I wanna see you jack. Move your body like that. Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body like that.
There is a side chain on it, which I'm going to turn off. That's why it's going to duck in up and
Hands
down.
up from the front to the back. Move your body like that. You know I wanna see you jack.
There we go.
Move your body like that. Hands up from the front to the back.
Pre-drop, we've got this kind of like vocal processing that's pretty cool. If it's going to let me play it.
Front to the back.
There we go. So, yeah, originally, let's have a look to see if I've played with her vocals anymore.
Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body like that. You know I wanna see you jack.
So it's just cutting it up, different timing. Obviously, you can see I've spaced out the vocals. So instead of it just being repeating immediately after the last bit, it's spread out a bit and just kind of rides with the beat a little bit better.
Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body.
And actually, to be fair, this is where I think I got my vocal shout inspiration from, is using the from Milazzo, these little ones. I think that was the sort of starting point for the Aldi vocal shouts. But for me, what makes this vocal cool is the cutting pre-drop with the front to the back. It took me a good day of like testing out what works where and if it sounds any good or not. Finally settled on this, and I'm super happy.
Move your body like that. From the front from the front to the back.
This gels super well into that drop. So let's have a bit of a look at the vocal processing, shall we?
Hands up.
So I've got a vocal bus, but the vocal itself, very simple EQ. Boosting a sort of bit, not the mids as such, but more the higher mids at 1,000. Just brings out the front with the there. So I just kind of boosted that just to help bring Malazzo through a little bit more. Again, around 9 to 10k, the same thing, but the high end, just to bring the crispness out of it a little. Nothing really below 200. And to be fair, for vocals, I'll usually always cut about 200. I don't really like sort of boxy vocals or any sort of oomph and low end in them. I'd rather them be quite airy and almost sort of softer, like Malazzo's.
Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body like that. You know I wanna see you jack.
Obviously, you can hear there's a ton of reverb on there. We've got vocal effects, so serum effects, I believe. We've got some hyper, barely any hyper, 5% mix, 2% unison, just for a little bit of width. It's very minor. The dimension quite the opposite, big size to get that wide sound with a smaller mix. My standard settings for dimension would be a size of 20 and then a mix of about 10%. For standard vocals, usually for SK, that's bang on. But like I said, this one's more airy and wide. I wanted that sort of atmospheric vocal. So having that bigger side just makes it feel it makes it feel wider. Less mix just helps control it a little bit. We've got a little bit of soft clip. 15% drive, it's very minor without it.
Hands up from the front to the back.
And then with.
Hands up from the front to the back.
Why are we lagging? I'm playing just the vocal. Let's get rid of all these. Maybe that will help.
Hands up from the front to the back.
So then we had the compressor. Not really doing too much. Again, just sort of subtle compression.
Hands up from the front to the back. Move your body like that. You know I wanna see you jack.
My standard kind of compression settings is bizarre, and a lot of people can say, why do you do that? My ratio for compression is always 4. It works. And another thing is, attack with compression. I never use attack. To me, that's counterproductive. The whole point of a compressor is that it acts quickly and cuts peaks. If there's an attack, it's not going to do that. So in my head, I don't understand that. Always 0 attack, ratio of 4. The release, I can move sort of suitably. I don't really move that too much. And then again, obviously the threshold just catching peaks. Got another EQ after that, after all the processing and distortion, just to sort of tidy it up a little bit. The way I like so the way I tell students about how to use EQs is almost compare it to like you going to a nightclub. When you go to a nightclub, compare that to a sound going into the mixer. A security guard's going to pat you down. Anything you shouldn't have is going to be taken off of you. Essentially, that's how I treat EQs. It comes into the mixer, give it a pat down, take away anything it shouldn't have, then it's all right to be processed and I can carry on. But the next EQ is just more security than anything, just making sure that nothing is coming through where it shouldn't be. And I've got A1 stereo control. This is my go-to for stereo control. Safe bass frequency 200. That means that anything 200 and below is going to be put into mono. Anything above 200, I've added 10% width, so it's a little bit wider. So just really controlling that sort of stereo sort of space there. So yeah, that's the vocal pretty much. Nothing too crazy. It's just the same sort of hook with the shouts as well, used in different ways throughout. So yeah, that's our vocal. Let's have a bit of a look at the bass sound design. You guys have all of these presets, I believe, through the various packs I've done on Patreon over the year and a half. But it might be quite cool to have a little bit of a look. So here's the melodies together. So within that, we've got layers upon layers upon layers. So obviously the main bass, the front to back sound. There we go. And that was actually from Evolution of Sound, inspired by a new. It's the original preset was inspired by a new bass. Again, Evolution of Sound's preset pack. Obviously, I played around with it and edited it around. The original was actually really sick. I did think about just using that, but of course, I want to make it a bit more unique and a bit more my style. It's very grotty and rough, which is I love about this sort of preset. I did have a top bass, very quiet. I must have not ended up using that. Bass 2, obviously the first hit, which is actually the same bass, I believe. Yeah, but slightly different. So no +4 on B. LFO shape's a little bit different. It's a little bit more prolonged. It's like the bum, 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 bum. You have the contrast between the length of notes. Works really, really well. We've got bass 3. Again, alternative version of bass 2, just for the variation throughout. Do that one more time with the bass 2. Just a bit of a call and response in the background. Obviously, my signature sub bend right at the very end. And our sub bass. Obviously, you're not really going to hear that. Very, very low sub. The main bass itself has quite a lot of low end. You can see in the spectrum up here, we're hitting around about 100. So the sub is just 100. Like, in fact, I think it's about 80 down. So there is between 80 and 100 is a bit of a gap just to separate them. But that's the basses in here. Let's have a look at the automations as well. So, I believe these ones here are, yeah, side chains. So I do side chains in a few different ways. For the longest time, it would just be volume automations, essentially. So you can see the volume, if we zoom in, it's purely a volume automation that starts at 0, and then I can dictate fully the shape of that LFO, just to get the most control out of it, and really dictate the specifics of it all. So these are the side chains for the 3 different layers, bass 1, 2, and 3. We've got the pitch bend for the sub bend right at the end. We've got an octave automation, which I don't actually know if no, I didn't end up using that. I went for the kind of switch up. I went for that instead of the octave change. Just a nice little bit of a difference there. Some EQ automations for build-ups and things like that. So this top one is the movement of the EQ, and the one below it is the on and off. So this one's on, the line's at the top, and the line is at the bottom, that's off. So you can see I'm just turning it on and making movements within that. When it's off, when it comes back on, there's movement. This is the reverb automation, so in the build up, the bass is really reverb. This is going to lag here. Really sort of distant coming in from far away. And again, just controlling that on and off. Delay, once again, the same idea, delay on and then off, and while it's on, there's some movement. And that's just to echo off, I believe, the bass in the build-up. The melody finishes a little bit earlier, and there's like a bar or two where that bass just sort of delays off into the distance to fill in the gaps. So that's my main bass. Let's have a look at this pad. That's the heartbeat of front to back, the main sort of backing sound. Again, volume automation for sidechain, and then an EQ, just giving it some movement so the low end sort of slides in and then slides out. We layer that with my Reese. So the Reese's automations are, this top one here is the pitch, so it stays static, and then just at the end of the build up, it's in the background because the low end's all been taken away, which we'll look at now. But what is left in the frequency range is being pitched up an octave. See our automation for sidechain, EQ. So same principle as before. EQ's off. I've turned it on, and then when it's on, it's acting, taking out all that low end. That's one big tip I can give is remove all of the low end on build-ups from every element to about 200 hertz. That way, when the drop hits, it's going to feel like it fucking smacks you in the face. But really, it's no different. You just created that space in the build-up to make you think the drop's hitting harder. So we've got some EQ there. This is just a volume automation for the Reese. Where things get busier in the build-up here, I didn't want the Reese so prominent at the beginning. So it just sits back in the mix a little bit. It looks like quite a big jump. It's not much at all, really. So yeah, that's the Reese and the pad. That's what we got. Ooh. There's a clock sound, apparently. I didn't even know I had that in there. This gives us a nice sense of rhythm with the drums, especially in the intro when it's just the drums, the sort of boom, 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 but rhythm. The clock ticking underneath just gives it a really nice little rhythm. Other than that, nothing really too exciting. I use vinyl static a lot. Probably you can't even hear that there. So quiet in the background. Once again, side chains. This is the volume automation, bringing him in and out. Just adds a bit of grit to the background and fills in the frequency spectrum slightly. Yeah, there's not too much else to say. Let's have a bit of a look at the drums. As always, my drums are usually really tight and really snappy. And front to back's a very good example of that. I really like to use snaps as well for like drum transitions. Just helps bridge that gap real nice, and you got the like marching rhythm to me. That's like a marching kind of rhythm. As it's playing, you'll hear there's always movement as well. The snare build's pitching down. There'll be other elements introduced later in the build up here. And now the snare's pitching up. You can hear the kicks lose and all that low end and some reverbs being introduced again, creating that space in the build up. Then when it drops, it's going to feel a lot heavier. Maybe some things to note would be my use of ear candy in the drops as well. Toms are a nice little fill there. So the percussion. Strange, because this is one of the tracks I used impacts in the least, which I would have thought would be the opposite. Obviously, you lot know I love an impact. The ones I've used in here are more of a softer, more of a crash than an impact. And then my big impact, signature Albsy impact. It just adds such a darker vibe to music, like having these bigger impacts, especially in gaps at the end of every 8 or 16. Instead of having like a vocal, a big boom into the next section is just so atmospheric to me. But yeah, I think that's pretty everything I could cover in this track. There's nothing else too exciting. It's just standard rises and effects. The key bits are like someone pointed out is the vocal processing, the sound design. I guess maybe we can talk about structure too. So for me, the way I structure everything is every track is more or less the same. There's always 16 bars before a build up, then usually 8 bars of a build up, or I'll do 16 bar intro, 16 bar build. Usually that's about a minute until the drop, whereas this I believe is about 45 seconds, a little bit less. Then our drop's going to be 32 bars, so 2 lots of 16. Um, and then again 16 bar break and build, 32 bar drop, and then 16 bar outro again. That is my go-to for every track. Again, the only thing I might do different in some tracks is the build-up would be double the length, so that it's 16 bars and not 8. But with this one, it wasn't. What I didn't want to do is make an intro and a breakdown. It's more starting and it builds, it builds, it builds, and then it drops. And then we have the sort of calmer breakdown later in the track. So helpful that. Thank you, FL Studio. You know the area I'm talking about. We have that kind of Reese, no bass. That's so helpful. Thanks for that. Yeah, that's pretty everything. Yeah, let me know what else other tracks you want to see me break down or anything in specifics. What I'm trying to do at the minute is as many of these as possible to sort of catch up. I know you guys have been waiting on these. So I'm trying to film one a day at the minute. So when you see this, if you make it this far in the video, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of the tutorial and breakdown, and let me know what you want to see next as well. As always, big ups for subscribing to the Patreon. Massive love. See you soon.